The sun had just started to rise, spreading a pale golden light through the thin curtains. Inside the small bedroom, Hira sat at the edge of the bed, her fingers trembling as she clutched the corner of her scarf. Her wedding bangles still felt strange on her wrists, like borrowed jewelry that didn't belong to her. Across the room, Ayan stood by the window, his shirt half-buttoned, his eyes fixed on the street below. He looked calm on the outside, but his mind was a storm of noise. Last night had changed his life completely. He had married a woman he barely knew. Neither of them had wanted this marriage. Their families had arranged it after months of relentless pressure. Ayan's mother believed Hira was the perfect girl, quiet, polite, and from a respectable family. Hira's father was convinced that Ayan, with his stable job and good name, was the ideal husband. To them, it was a match made in heaven. But for Ayan and Hira, it was a quiet disaster waiting to happen. They had only met twice before the wedding, once at a family dinner where they exchanged polite, empty smiles, and once during a short, silent walk in a garden where neither dared to speak their mind. Both knew it wasn't love, just an arrangement, but no one had bothered to ask them how they truly felt. Now, the house was silent. The laughter and music from the wedding night were gone, replaced by an unnerving quiet. Only two strangers remained, tied together by promises they never made to each other. Ayan finally turned away from the window. "Do you need anything?" he asked, his voice careful, almost too soft to hear. Hira shook her head without looking at him. "No, thank you." He nodded, even though she didn't see it. He wanted to say more, something kind, something to break the heavy silence that suffocated the room, but the words were stuck in his throat. He left the room, his footsteps slow and uneven. Hira looked around. The room felt foreign, the walls painted a color she didn't choose, the bed neatly made by someone else's hands. She pressed her palms together and closed her eyes. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the fan. Downstairs, Ayan's mother was already busy planning their future. She was on the phone with relatives, her voice proud and cheerful. "They look perfect together," she said. "Soon they'll settle into love." But love doesn't grow from silence. It needs warmth, it needs connection, and neither Ayan nor Hira knew how to give that yet. The day passed in a slow, painful blur. Hira tried to help in the kitchen, but Ayan's mother gently shooed her away. "You're the bride," she said kindly. "Just rest. Ayan will take care of everything." But rest was the last thing Hira could find. Every corner of the house was a constant reminder that she was now someone's wife. A stranger's wife. Someone she didn't choose. As evening approached, she escaped to the balcony for some fresh air. The sky was turning a beautiful shade of orange, and the soft call to prayer echoed in the distance. For the first time all day, she breathed deeply. The sound of the wind, the smell of damp earth after a light rain, it all reminded her of home, of a peace she desperately missed. Then, she heard Ayan's voice behind her. "You can use the balcony whenever you like," he said quietly. She turned, startled. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the sunset just like she was. "Thank you," she said softly. A small silence followed. But this one felt different. It wasn't heavy and awkward like before. It was lighter, almost comfortable. For a moment, the air between them wasn't filled with unspoken questions, just a quiet, mutual understanding. Ayan finally broke the silence. "I know you didn't want this." Hira froze. No one had ever said it out loud before. The truth hung in the air between them. "I didn't either," he continued, his voice honest and free of blame. "But maybe we can still try to make it peaceful." For the first time, she looked at him properly. He looked tired, but not unkind. There was a gentleness hiding behind his guarded eyes. "I'd like that," she whispered. They stood together in silence, watching the sky shift from orange to purple. The moment was small, almost insignificant, but it felt like the first thread of connection in a world that had pushed them apart. Inside, the clock kept ticking. The light faded, and the night returned. As Ayan closed the balcony door, he said quietly, "Good night, Hira." She looked down at her hands, her bangles catching the last sliver of sunset light. "Good night," she whispered back. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the wall, two separate hearts learning how to live inside the same story, hoping that peace might one day bloom into something more. The morning after arrived with a quiet hush, as if the world itself was holding its breath, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace between them. The air in the house was still, a silence so careful, it felt like both their hearts were trying not to make a sound. Ayan sat at the dining table, a newspaper held open in his hands, but his eyes weren't really reading the words. They were lost somewhere else, in a world far from the print. The paper rustled faintly each time he turned a page, a small, lonely sound. Across from him, Hira poured tea, her movements slow and deliberate, almost nervous. The steady stream of tea filling the small cups was the only sound that dared to break the silence. They didn't speak. There were no arguments, no fights, just two quiet souls sharing the same walls but living in separate worlds. Their lives fell into a polite, empty routine. When Ayan left for work, Hira would clean the already spotless house. When he returned, she would cook dinner and leave his plate on the table. Everything was courteous. Everything was vacant. But he noticed the little things. He saw how she always left the window slightly ajar, letting in a sliver of fresh air. He heard her humming softly to herself while arranging flowers, a melody only she could hear. He saw the way she would quickly wipe her tears before anyone could notice, and she noticed him too. She saw the slight hesitation in his posture before he entered the house each evening, as if gathering the strength to cross the threshold. She saw him try to smile, even when exhaustion was etched on his face. She saw the kindness that hid behind his wall of silence. One evening, the power suddenly went out. The house plunged into darkness, and the silence deepened. Hira froze, her hand still resting on the kitchen counter. "Don't worry." Ayan's voice cut through the dark, surprisingly calm. "I'll find the torch." A moment later, a faint beam of light sliced through the blackness. In the trembling glow of the flashlight, their eyes met for the first time that day. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, her voice small. "Yes, I'm just not used to the darkness in a new house." He offered a small, hesitant smile, just enough to make her heart skip a beat. "I guess neither of us is used to this house yet." In that shared darkness, something small but significant shifted between them. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the beginning of understanding. The days that followed carried a strange, new rhythm. They moved around each other like shadows, still distant, still careful, but newly aware of the other's presence. One morning, while Hira was washing dishes, a glass slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. The sharp, sudden sound echoed through the quiet house. She gasped and knelt to pick up the broken pieces. "Don't!" Ayan's voice was sharp as he rushed into the kitchen. "You'll cut your hand." The urgency in his tone startled her, but his concern softened the moment. He gently took her hand, turning it over under the light. "You're bleeding," he murmured, his voice now soft. "It's nothing," she said, embarrassed by the fuss. He retrieved the first aid box and carefully cleaned the small cut on her finger. His touch was light, his fingers brushing against her skin. It wasn't intentional, but it was enough to send a flutter through her heart. "You should be more careful," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on her hand. She just nodded, her own voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Their eyes met again, and for a fleeting moment, the air between them felt different, warmer, more real. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the moment was gone. He stood up abruptly and walked away, pretending to be busy with something else. Later that night, Hira found herself looking at her bandaged finger, a small smile playing on her lips. It was the first time since the wedding that she had truly felt seen. The next morning brought an unexpected change. Ayan's mother announced she was leaving to visit a relative for a few days. The sound of her car driving away was followed by a profound silence. For the first time, they were completely alone in the house. Just them. Hira felt a wave of nervousness. How was she supposed to act? Should she talk? Should she remain quiet? She busied herself with making breakfast, setting the table with more care than usual. Ayan walked into the dining room, still adjusting his tie. He stopped, looking at the spread on the table. "You made all this?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Yes," she replied softly. "I thought you might be hungry before work." He sat down. It was a simple breakfast, an omelet, toast, and tea, but it smelled like comfort. After taking a few bites, he spoke. "It's good." She looked up, shocked. He'd spoken. To her. "You like it?" she asked, her voice hopeful. He nodded. "Yes, thank you." It wasn't a grand declaration, but for Hira it meant the world. A quiet, hidden smile warmed her from the inside. For the rest of the day, she moved around the house with a new lightness in her step. She even started humming again, her soft melody weaving through the silent rooms. And from his study, Ayan heard her. Her voice was like a gentle tune, real and peaceful. For the first time, he didn't feel so alone in his own home. That night, as he returned from work, he saw the warm lights glowing from the kitchen and the faint shadow of Hira moving inside. An unfamiliar sense of calm settled in his chest. It felt good. He stood at the door for a few seconds, just watching her. Maybe, he thought, peace doesn't always come from a deliberate choice. Sometimes it's found in the people you never expected to meet, in the quiet moments that slowly build a new reality. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, painting soft golden stripes across the kitchen floor. Hira stood by the stove, her dupatta tied loosely around her shoulders, her full attention on the pan in front of her. This was the first time she was cooking alone for Ayan, and her heart was beating just a little faster than usual. She wanted it to be perfect. He was in the next room, the quiet clicks of his laptop keys the only sound breaking the stillness. He was finishing some work from home. The house felt calm, a peaceful bubble away from the world. No noise, no tension, just the gentle rhythm of life finding its way back. But peace sometimes is a fleeting thing. Without warning, the oil in the pan crackled, spitting angrily. A tiny drop flew out, landing squarely on Hira's hand. She gasped, a sharp intake of breath. Ah! The pan trembled in her grip, and before she could pull it away, another, larger splash of hot oil landed on her wrist. From the other room, a chair scraped back abruptly. "Hira?" Ayan's voice, sharp with panic, sliced through the quiet. He ran into the kitchen to find her standing frozen, clutching her wrist, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears of pain. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. It's nothing," she stammered, trying to downplay the sting. "Just a little burn." Before she could pull her hand away, he gently took it. The skin on her wrist was already an angry red, beginning to swell. "It's not little," he said quietly. His tone wasn't angry or annoyed, it was something else entirely. It was worry. Real, raw worry. He guided her hand under the cool, running water of the tap. "Keep it there," he murmured, his voice soft. The cold water stung at first, but it quickly brought a wave of relief. Hira watched him from the corner of her eye. His jaw was clenched, his focus entirely on her hand. It was strange, seeing him like this. Not the distant, polite man she was used to, but someone who was truly present, truly there with her. "I told you I'm fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the running water. "And I told you it's not fine," he replied, his gaze fixed on her reddening skin, not her face. "You should have called me. I didn't want to bother you." "You never bother me," he said, almost under his breath, so soft she wondered if she'd imagined it. When he finally looked up, their eyes met. For a long, suspended second, the world seemed to pause. The only sounds were the running tap and the frantic, echoing rhythm of two nervous hearts. He broke the gaze first, clearing his throat. "I'll get the first aid box." He left the room, and Hira stood frozen, her wrist still under the water, but her thoughts were spinning. He returned moments later, opening the small white box and sitting across from her. Without a word, he carefully dabbed ointment on her burn. His touch was so gentle, so careful, almost protective. "This might sting," he said softly. She nodded, her voice small. "It's okay." He wrapped the bandage slowly, his fingers making sure it wasn't too tight. She noticed his hands were trembling slightly, maybe from guilt, maybe from something deeper he wasn't ready to admit. When he finished, she whispered, "Thank you, Ian." He didn't reply immediately. His eyes lingered on her face, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but as if he was truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the quiet strength behind her soft eyes. "You should rest," he said finally. "I'll finish cooking first," she said quickly, trying to pull her hand back. He shook his head firmly. "No, I'll handle it." She blinked, surprised. "You?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Yes, I think I can manage an omelet and some tea. I promise I won't burn down the kitchen." A small, shy laugh escaped her before she could stop it. It was real, the kind of laugh that lights up a silent room. She sat on a nearby stool, watching him move awkwardly around the kitchen, and felt a warmth spreading slowly through her chest. He wasn't a perfect romantic hero from a movie, but he was kind. And sometimes, kindness is all it takes for a heart to begin to open. He turned off the stove and brought her a plate. "It's not fancy," he said, a little self-consciously. "But it's safe," she smiled, a genuine warm smile. "Safe is good." They both laughed quietly, their soft voices mingling in the golden light of the late afternoon. They ate in silence, but this time, it wasn't an empty, awkward silence. It felt like peace, like something gentle and new had settled in the space between them. Before heading back to his room, Ayan paused. "Be careful next time." Hira smiled faintly. "Only if you promise not to cook again." He stopped in the doorway, looking back at her with a small, playful grin. "Deal." That night, Hira lay in bed, her bandaged hand resting on her chest. For the first time since their marriage, she didn't feel so alone. She knew that somewhere, just behind the wall, Ayan was still awake, and maybe, just maybe, he was thinking of her too. "We'll see you in the next one." The days that followed were quieter than before. But it was a different kind of quiet, not cold or distant, but calm. Something had definitely shifted after the accident. I found myself glancing toward Hira more often. When she walked past me, I noticed the way her scarf brushed so softly against her shoulder. When she smiled at something small, a flower blooming in the garden or the warm smell of chai. I noticed that too, but I also noticed the bandage on her hand. Every single time I saw it, a sharp sting of guilt hit me. I didn't understand why I felt so responsible. Maybe it was because I had seen her pain up close and I just couldn't forget her trembling voice saying, "It's nothing." That evening, the house felt unusually silent. My mother was away again, visiting relatives. It was just the two of us. Two people learning how to breathe in the same space without shattering the silence. I sat in the living room, trying to read a file for work, but my mind just wasn't on it. From the kitchen, I could hear the faint sound of cups and plates as Hira cleaned up after dinner. I hesitated for what felt like a long time before finally getting up and walking towards the kitchen. When I entered, she turned, a little surprised. "Oh, you need something?" I shook my head. "No, I just thought I'd help." She blinked, looking at me. "Help?" "Yeah," I said, managing a faint, awkward smile. "I think I owe you something after burning your hand." Her lips curved into a small, gentle smile. "That wasn't your fault." "Still," I said softly, picking up a towel to dry the dishes she was washing. "Let's call it an apology." We worked side by side in a comfortable silence. The small kitchen felt warm, not from any heat, but from something delicate and gentle growing between us. At one point, our hands brushed as we both reached for the same plate. For a split second, everything stopped. The sound, the air, even time itself. Hira pulled her hand back quickly. "Sorry," she murmured. I looked down, a faint smile on my face. Don't be. When we finished, Hira leaned against the counter. You really didn't have to help. I wanted to, I said, and this time my voice carried no hesitation. She looked at me quietly for a moment. The distance that had once felt like an impenetrable wall now felt more like a bridge, slowly being built between us. I was angry at first, she admitted softly. Not at you. Just at everything. I didn't choose this marriage. I thought it meant I'd lose myself. I looked at her then, my eyes steady on hers. Maybe we both felt the same. You? She asked, genuinely surprised. I nodded. I thought being forced into something meant I'd lose control of my life. But then I met you, and it didn't feel like losing. The air between us grew thick, not heavy, but full of unsaid things. Words hung there, but neither of us dared to say what our hearts were already whispering. Hira looked down, hiding a shy smile. That sounds nice to hear, I exhaled slowly. It's just the truth. A short silence followed, the kind that speaks more than words ever could. Then, my eyes landed on her hand again. The bandage was looser now. Can I check your hand? I asked gently. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I carefully unwrapped the bandage, my fingers brushing against her wrist. The burn was healing, but the skin was still pink and tender. It's getting better, I said quietly. She smiled softly. Thanks to you. For a moment I didn't move. I just looked at her eyes, glistening under the dim kitchen light. Her voice so fragile, yet so brave. Something about her presence made me feel human again. Like the walls I had built around my own heart were slowly crumbling. I wanted to say I was sorry, for being distant, for not truly seeing her sooner, for everything unspoken between us. But the words got lost somewhere in my throat. Instead, I said the only thing I could manage. You're stronger than I thought. Hira laughed softly. You mean stronger than I look? Both, I said, a real smile finally reaching my face. As we stood there, the rain outside softened to a drizzle, and a cool wind slipped through the open window, brushing against us. The scent of wet earth filled the air. Calm, soothing, almost romantic. It felt like the world outside had paused just to give us this single moment. Hira turned toward me, her eyes gentle. You don't have to say it, she said quietly. I looked at her, puzzled. Know what? She smiled faintly. That you're sorry? I froze, then lowered my eyes. Maybe I am. She stepped a little closer, not too near, but just enough for me to feel her presence. And maybe I forgive you. Neither of us spoke after that. The silence was full of meaning, apology, forgiveness, and something much deeper that neither of us could yet name. When I finally turned to leave, I stopped at the doorway and said softly, Good night, Hira. She smiled, her voice barely a whisper. Good night. And that night, as the rain washed over the city, we both lay awake. Not from discomfort, but from the quiet, certain realization that something inside us had just changed forever. Thank you so much for listening to this part of the story. If you're enjoying this journey, please don't forget to hit that like button. The morning light filtered into the house like a quiet promise. It touched the pale walls, rested on the small dining table, and fell softly across Hira's face as she poured tea into 2 cups. It had been weeks since the accident, and since that night of unspoken apologies. Something in the air had changed. The silence between her and Ayan no longer felt like an empty chasm. It was calm, almost peaceful. Ayan walked into the room, his hair still damp from a shower, a towel resting on his shoulders. He looked at her with a shy kind of ease, as if it no longer felt strange to find her there. Good morning, she said quietly. He smiled. Morning. It was a simple exchange, but it carried something new. Comfort. They sat across from each other, sipping their tea. The quiet hum of life surrounded them, the ticking clock, the distant city noise, the smell of toast. It was all so ordinary, yet suddenly, it felt beautiful. A yawn broke the silence. I might be home early today. My meeting got postponed. Hira looked up, surprised. Really? That's good. Yeah, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. Maybe I can help you with something. She raised an eyebrow, a hint of playfulness in her eyes. Like cooking again? He chuckled, a low, warm sound. No. I think I've learned my lesson. That was the first time she laughed, truly laughed since her wedding. It tumbled out unplanned, soft at first, then brighter. Aeon froze for a second, caught off guard by the sound. Her laughter filled the small room like sunlight breaking through clouds. Noticing him staring, she quickly covered her mouth. Sorry, she said, her cheeks flushing. Don't be, he replied, his smile widening. I didn't realize how quiet this house was until now. Later that day, while Hira was folding laundry in the living room, Ayan came home, just as he'd said. He looked unusually cheerful. I brought something, he announced, hiding his hands behind his back. She looked at him, puzzled. What is it? He revealed a small potted plant, a tiny green sprout in a simple clay pot. It's for the balcony, he said. You mentioned you like plants, right? Her eyes softened instantly. He had remembered a small detail from a forgotten conversation. You remembered. I try, he said with a gentle grin. They went to the balcony together. The air was cool, the sky painted with gentle clouds. Ayan placed the plant near the railing, brushing a bit of soil from his fingers. Hira watched him, a quiet warmth spreading through her chest. You know, she said softly, when I was little, my mother used to say every home needs a living thing, a flower, a bird, or a heart willing to care. He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable but kind. I think she was right. Their eyes met, and in that moment of stillness, something honest and tender passed between them. Breaking the soft tension, Ayan's lips curved into a smile. Let's name it. The plant? She laughed. Why not? Everything important needs a name. She thought for a moment, her gaze landing on the small, determined sprout. How about Hope? He smiled back. Hope it is. They both laughed again, a gentle, shared sound as if the name carried more meaning than either of them would admit. Later that evening, the inevitable happened. The power went out. The house was plunged into sudden darkness and silence. Oh no, Hira sighed. Not again. It's fine. Ayan's voice came from the dark, followed by the scratch of a match. He lit a candle. At least we have company this time. Hope. She smiled at the small joke and he grinned back. The candlelight flickered between them, soft and golden, painting the room in warmth and making even the shadows look beautiful. He sat down on the floor, leaning against the couch. You know, he said into the quiet, I used to think silence was peace, but now, I think silence is only peaceful when the right person is in it. Her heart skipped a beat. She sat down beside him, her voice barely a whisper. And how do you know who the right person is? He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the candlelight, deep and sincere. You just feel it. For a long while they said nothing. The world outside was quiet except for the gentle patter of rain beginning to fall. Then unexpectedly, Hira sneezed, a soft, sudden sound that made her blush instantly in the dim light. Ayan burst into laughter, a full, genuine sound that startled her. Bless you, he said between chuckles. Oh no, she muttered, hiding her face in her hands. That was so embarrassing. He only laughed harder. You sneeze like a kitten. Playfully, she threw a cushion at him. Stop it! But her own laughter soon followed his, bright and uncontrolled. Their voices filled the dimly lit room, echoing against walls that had once only known silence. When the lights finally flickered back on, they were still smiling, their eyes shining brighter than the bulb overhead. Ayan looked at her, his laughter fading into a quiet, thoughtful expression. You should laugh more often. She tilted her head. Why? Because, he said softly, his voice full of a new emotion, it makes this house feel like home. Her heart trembled at those words. For the first time she felt something deep and real blooming inside her. Not fear, not duty, but a fragile, budding affection. As they blew out the candle, their laughter faded into a comfortable silence. But the warmth remained, alive, soft, and unforgettable. That night before she went to sleep, Hira stepped onto the balcony and touched the small green leaves of the plant. "Good night, Hope," she whispered into the night. "Thank you so much for watching." The rain had stopped, leaving the world wrapped in a quiet stillness. The electricity had gone again, and only one candle burned on the small table in the living room. Its soft light danced across the walls, glowing against the quiet air. Hira sat on the floor near the couch, her knees drawn close, watching the flame sway. Ayan was beside her, leaning back with his hands behind his head, eyes fixed on the shadows above them. Neither spoke for a long time, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that said everything words couldn't tell. "I used to like nights like this," Hira said finally. "When the lights went out at my old home, my mother would tell stories. She said darkness helped people listen better." Ayan smiled faintly. Maybe she was right. "She always was," she replied softly, then added, "It's strange, though. This house used to feel too quiet, but tonight it feels calm." He turned slightly toward her. "Because you're not alone anymore?" Her eyes lifted to his, surprised. "Maybe," she said, her voice small. "Or maybe because someone decided to bring home a plant named Hope." He laughed under his breath. "Hope deserves credit for a lot of things." The room glowed warmly as the candlelight flickered against their faces. Shadows moved across his jawline, the soft curve of her cheeks, the space between them that seemed to grow smaller with every second. "You know," Ayan said quietly, "when I first met you, I thought you'd never talk to me again after the wedding." Hira smiled, her eyes on the candle. "I thought the same. You were always so serious." "I was scared," he admitted. She looked at him. "You? Scared?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. Scared of failing someone I didn't even know. Scared of hurting you. Scared of this whole idea of being tied to someone for life." Hira's expression softened. "I was scared too, but not of you." "What then?" "Of losing myself," she said. "I thought marriage would take away who I was. I thought I'd become invisible." Ayan looked at her carefully, the way her voice shook slightly at the end, the way she held her scarf tightly in her hands. "You're not invisible, Hira," he said, his voice gentle but certain. "You were never invisible." Her eyes glistened as she met his gaze. The flickering flame reflected in them like tiny stars. "You don't have to say that," she whispered. "I'm not saying it to make you feel better," he replied. "I'm saying it because it's true." Their eyes locked again, longer this time. The air felt thicker, heavier with all the words neither had said for weeks. "I used to think I was trapped in this marriage," he confessed quietly. "But now, I'm starting to wonder if I was wrong." She blinked, her heart thudding in her chest. "Wrong? Maybe this wasn't a trap," he said softly. "Maybe it was a way to find what I didn't know I needed." Hira looked down, her fingers nervously twisting her scarf. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because—" She paused, unable to finish. "Because people will think it means something." He leaned slightly closer. "Maybe it does." Her breath caught. The candlelight flickered between them, their faces only inches apart now. The silence around them was alive, with warmth, fear, and something too deep to name. "Ayan," she whispered. "You don't have to." "I know," he interrupted softly. "I don't have to, but I want to." He exhaled slowly, his voice trembling just enough to betray how much it cost him to speak. "I don't know when it happened, Hira," he said, "but one day I stopped seeing you as the person I was forced to marry, and started seeing you as the person I can't stop thinking about." Her eyes widened. Shock, disbelief, and something like relief all at once. She turned her face away, hiding her trembling smile. "You shouldn't say that." He smiled faintly. "Then you shouldn't look so happy hearing it." For the first time, she didn't correct him. She didn't run from the feeling. She just let it exist. The candle flame danced between them, golden and alive. Their shadows moved closer until there was hardly any space left. Hira whispered, "If things had been different. If we'd met in another way." He finished her thought gently. "I still would have found you." The rain outside began to pour harder, filling the silence with its rhythm, like applause from the sky. They sat together until the candle finally burned low. The flame dimmed, leaving only the faint glow on their faces. When Ayan finally stood, he said quietly, "Good night, Hira." She smiled, her heart too full to speak. After a pause, she whispered, "Good night, Ayan." And as the last bit of light vanished, both of them knew. Something unspoken had been said that night, something that neither could ever take back. The house was quiet, but Ayan's heart was not. He sat in the dark living room, his elbows on his knees, staring at the flicker of the last candle. It was close to midnight, and the world outside was drenched in rain. He couldn't sleep, not after what he had said to Hira earlier. His own words kept echoing inside his mind. "I cannot stop thinking about you." In her room, Hira lay awake too. She turned from side to side, staring at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face in the candlelight. Those eyes that had finally spoken the truth. Her heart refused to stay calm. She got up quietly, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. The night air was cool, brushing gently against her skin. From the hallway, she saw a faint glow coming from the living room. Ayan didn't notice her at first. He was lost in thought, running his hands through his hair. "Ayan?" Her voice came softly from behind. He turned. The surprise in his eyes melted quickly into something gentler. "You're awake?" "I couldn't sleep," she said. "You?" "Same," he admitted with a half smile. "Guess neither of us knows how to rest anymore." She sat on the couch opposite him. For a while, they said nothing. The only sounds were the rain and their quiet breathing. "You didn't mean what you said earlier, did you?" she asked, her voice uncertain but curious. He looked at her, his eyes calm but deep. "Which part?" "The part where you said you can't stop thinking about me." He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and steady. "Every word." Her heart skipped. She looked down quickly, unable to meet his gaze. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "It makes it harder for me." "Harder for you?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "Because I don't know what to feel anymore." Ayan stood up, taking a slow step closer. "Then let me help you figure it out." Her breath caught. "Ayan." He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. The rain outside grew louder, as if echoing their hearts. "You've been strong since the day we met," he said, his tone trembling slightly. "You've tried to make peace with something neither of us chose, but tonight I need to be honest." Hira looked up. "Honest about what?" He took a deep breath. "About the fact that I don't see you as a stranger anymore. I don't see this marriage as an arrangement. I see it as something I never deserved, but somehow got." Her eyes widened, shimmering in the soft candlelight. "Don't say that." "I have to," he said. "Because if I don't say it now, I might never get the chance." He took another step, and she didn't move away. The air between them felt electric, every second stretching longer, heavier. Hira spoke quietly, almost a whisper. "Ayan, people don't fall in love this way." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe we're not like most people." She wanted to respond, to argue, to step back, but she couldn't. Her heart wouldn't let her. A drop of rain fell through the open window, landing on her wrist. She flinched softly, and before she could react, Ayan reached out instinctively and brushed it away. His touch lingered, gentle, uncertain, but real. The moment stretched, too long, too close. Her eyes lifted to his. Neither spoke. Words would have ruined it. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry if this feels wrong, but I can't keep pretending anymore." He wasn't angry. He wasn't desperate. His voice was simply full of emotion that had been caged for too long. Her lips parted slightly. "What are you saying, Ayan?" He looked at her with quiet surrender. "I'm saying that somewhere between all our silence, all our distance, I fell for you." Hira blinked away tears she didn't realize had gathered. "You don't even know me that well." He smiled sadly. "Maybe not. But I know the way you care for small things. The way you keep the window open so the air can breathe. The way you hum when you think no one's listening. The way you smile when you're trying not to cry." She tried to speak, but her throat tightened. "Ayan, please," he interrupted softly, stepping even closer. "I've tried to stay quiet. I've tried to be patient. But tonight, I can't." For a long second, neither moved. Then, in a moment that felt like the world had stopped, he reached up, not to claim, but to comfort, and brushed a tear from her cheek. Hira didn't pull away. She simply closed her eyes. Everything inside her, the pain, the confusion, the loneliness, finally melted into something else. Something tender. He whispered, "I don't want to lose control, Hira, but I already have." When she opened her eyes, the candlelight reflected between them. Two souls finally stripped of distance. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence spoke enough. That night, neither of them slept. Not because of guilt or fear, but because their hearts, for the first time, had started beating in rhythm with each other. Thank you so much for joining us for this story. If you enjoyed this journey with Ayan and Hira, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. Your encouragement means the world and helps us bring more stories like this to you. We'll see you in the next one. The first sunlight crept through the thin white curtains, brushing the floor in golden stripes. Hira opened her eyes slowly, her heartbeat still quiet but unsteady. The house felt different. The air warmer, the silence gentler, as if it too remembered last night. She sat up, pulling her shawl close. The rain had left tiny drops on the window, each one shining like a tiny jewel. Her reflection looked back at her, calm, yet changed. Downstairs, Ayan was already awake. He stood in the kitchen making tea, his hair still messy from sleep, his shirt half-buttoned. The warm, spicy smell of chai filled the room, mixing with the scent of wet earth drifting in from outside. He poured 2 cups, paused, then smiled to himself. 1 cup wasn't enough anymore. When Hira entered quietly, he turned. "Morning?" She nodded. "Morning." Her voice was small, almost shy, but her eyes lingered on him longer than they ever had before. He pushed a cup toward her. "Careful, it's hot." "Thank you," she said, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. For a brief second, their hands brushed. The warmth from the cup seemed to travel straight to her heart, making it beat a little faster. They both took a sip in silence. For the very first time, the quiet between them didn't feel like a wall. It felt like breathing the same air. After a moment, she spoke softly. "You didn't sleep?" He shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "Couldn't. Too many thoughts." "About work?" she asked, a gentle tease in her voice. He looked at her over the rim of his cup, his gaze direct and sincere. "About you." Hira looked down quickly, hiding the shy smile that bloomed on her face. Her cheeks turned a shade pinker. "You shouldn't say that first thing in the morning." "Why not?" "Because it sounds serious." "Maybe it is," he said simply, his voice low and steady. She set her cup down, pretending to focus on the window. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The heavy gray light had changed. turning into a soft, hopeful gold. He watched her for a moment. There was a newfound calmness about her, but also a quiet strength, like someone who was learning how to live again on their own terms. "Hira," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "About last night." She froze, the words hanging in the air between them. He hesitated, then continued, his voice earnest. "I didn't mean to cross a line, I couldn't hold the truth anymore." She turned to him then, her eyes soft but filled with an unspoken question. "And what is the truth, Ayan?" He took a slow, steadying breath. "That I care for you, deeply, and I don't want you to think it was just the rain or the heat of the moment." For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then a small, real smile touched her lips. "You think I'm that fragile?" "No," he replied, his voice full of admiration. "I think you're the strongest person I know. That's why I had to say it right." Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the warm light of understanding. "I used to think love was something big," she said slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Loud, full of grand promises. But maybe it's just this. A quiet morning, 2 cups of tea, and someone who finally looks at you like you matter." Ayan didn't speak. He simply reached out and gently adjusted the edge of her shawl that had slipped from her shoulder. His hand lingered for just a moment, careful, respectful, yet impossibly tender. And this time, she didn't move away. "I don't know where this will go," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. "But I don't want to pretend it isn't real." She looked right into his eyes, her own voice trembling just slightly with emotion. "Then let's not pretend." They both smiled, small, genuine smiles full of quiet relief. The storm inside them had finally passed, leaving a profound sense of peace in its wake. Later that morning, Ayan's mother returned home. Her cheerful voice filled the hallway again, asking about breakfast and her plans for the market. Hira rushed to greet her, slipping easily back into the gentle rhythm of their household. But the light in her eyes had changed. Ayan noticed, and even his mother noticed. "You two seem different," she said playfully, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Ayan just smiled. "Maybe we finally learned how to talk." The day unfolded like the first sunlight after a long storm, ordinary, yet filled with a new and beautiful meaning. They worked together in small ways, passing plates at the table, finishing errands in town, sharing small half-smiles that said more than words ever could. As evening came, Ayan stepped onto the balcony. The little plant they had named Hope stood taller now, fresh drops of water shining on its green leaves. Hira joined him quietly, standing beside him as they looked out at the city. He pointed to it. "Look, it's growing fast." She nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "Because we stopped forgetting to water it." They both laughed softly, a shared, easy sound. As the sun dipped below the clouds, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ayan whispered, "Maybe love grows the same way, slow, quiet, but steady." Hira smiled, watching the last rays of sunlight fade. "Then let's not forget to water it either." That night, as the world fell asleep again, 2 hearts that had once belonged to strangers beat calmly and steadily under one roof, finally together. We'll see you in the next one. The 2 weeks following their quiet confession had been a time of gentle healing. The house, which once echoed with silence, now breathed with a soft, steady rhythm. Hira and Ayan had found an unspoken harmony, a language woven from small gestures and shared glances. But peace, as it often does, rarely stays private for long. That morning, the familiar creak of the front gate broke the quiet, followed by a wave of cheerful voices. Ayan's mother had returned, and she wasn't alone. Aunts, cousins, and a storm of lively chatter swept through the home, filling every corner. Hira stepped forward, a polite smile on her face, and welcomed them. She touched her mother-in-law's hand with respect. "It's good to have you home," she said, her voice warm. Her mother-in-law embraced her tightly. "You've taken such good care of the house. I can see the difference." Just then, Ayan appeared, casually adjusting his sleeves. He greeted his family with his usual calm grace, but his eyes instinctively searched for Hira. Their gazes met for a fleeting second before she turned away, a faint blush warming her cheeks. The house was soon bustling with activity, tea being poured, suitcases unpacked, and cousins chasing each other through the halls. Hira moved through it all with a quiet kindness, a gentle presence that didn't go unnoticed. The relatives, as they always do, observed everything. "Look at her," one aunt whispered to another. "She's changed. There's a glow on her face." Ayan's mother simply smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. "Perhaps love," she said softly, "can soften even the deepest silence." Later that afternoon, as the women sat together, one of the younger cousins giggled. "Bobby, tell us," she teased, "is Ayan still so serious all the time? Or have you finally taught him how to smile?" Hira looked down, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "He smiles sometimes." "Sometimes," another chimed in. "We should thank you for that small miracle." Hira's bright, free laughter joined theirs, and from the next room Ayan heard it. For the first time, the noise of family didn't feel exhausting. It felt wonderfully, beautifully alive. As evening approached, it was decided the relatives would stay for dinner. The kitchen filled with the rich aromas of fried onions, fresh coriander, and warm spices. Hira moved with a newfound confidence, cooking alongside Ayan's mother, who watched her with quiet, growing approval. At the dining table, the conversation flowed as easily as the food. The aunts peppered Ayan with questions about his work, while the cousins shared animated stories, their laughter echoing in every corner. Then, one of the aunts, the bold, outspoken one, turned to Hira with a mischievous chuckle. "You've become a fine wife now," she said. "But tell me honestly, does he still make you nervous?" A brief silence fell over the table. Hira, caught off guard, blinked. Her eyes flickered toward Ayan, who had looked up from his plate. A silent, knowing exchange passed between them, a mix of amusement and affection. A gentle smile touched Hira's lips. "Not anymore," she replied calmly. Her simple answer drew warm smiles from everyone. But for Ayan, it did something more. It melted away the last traces of his doubt, making him realize just how far they had journeyed together. From strangers bound by silence to partners sharing a profound peace. After dinner, as everyone settled in the living room, Ayan's mother pulled him aside. "She's changed you," she said, her voice full of quiet pride. "You look happy, Ayan." He smiled, a genuine, easy smile. "Maybe happiness isn't something you find," he mused. "Maybe it just walks into your life when you finally stop chasing it." His mother nodded, understanding the unspoken depth of his words. When night fell, the house grew quiet once more. Hira stepped onto the balcony, seeking a breath of fresh air. The little plant she called Hope swayed gently in the breeze, its leaves glistening under the moonlight. Ayan soon joined her, standing beside her in comfortable silence. "They all like you," he said softly. She smiled. "I hope so." "They do," he confirmed. "But it's not because you're trying to please them. It's because you're real." She looked up at him, a playful light in her eyes. "You've learned how to talk beautifully, Mr. Sirius." He let out a quiet laugh. "Only around you." They stood there for a long time, side by side, watching the city lights glitter beyond the rain-washed streets. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of everything they had built. "I never thought," Hira began softly, "that I could belong anywhere after that wedding night." He turned slightly towards her. "And now?" She met his gaze, her eyes soft and clear. "Now, I think I've found home." Ayan didn't reply with words. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, gently, respectfully. For the first time, their fingers intertwined without hesitation. Below them, the rain had stopped. Above, the moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting a silver glow. And as they stood there, two silhouettes against the night, the echoes of laughter from earlier seemed to linger within the walls. A sweet reminder that even after the storm, Love always finds a way to sound like home. The morning began like any other, calm, golden, and quiet. I stood by the window, tying my hair loosely as sunlight touched my face. The house had finally learned peace. Laughter now lived in its corners, a warm, comforting sound. But that morning, peace arrived with an envelope. The mailman had dropped it off with a light knock and a polite, "Good morning." Inside the plain white envelope was a letter. Official, crisp, and completely unexpected. It was from the National Education Board, a notice about a teaching position I had applied for months before the wedding. A job in another city. My hands trembled slightly as I read it. I had forgotten all about it, buried it under layers of new memories and a new life. The letter was direct. "You have been selected for a permanent position at our city campus. Reporting date, next month." I sat down slowly, my mind racing. The questions weren't about the job itself, but about everything that had changed since I first sent that application. Back then, all I wanted was an escape, a sense of freedom, a chance to build a life on my own terms. But now, things weren't the same. When Ian came downstairs, he noticed my stillness instantly. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said lightly, trying to tease a smile out of me. I managed a small, distracted one. "Something like that." His own smile faded into a gentle frown. "What happened?" I didn't say anything. I just handed him the letter. He unfolded it, scanned it once, then read it again, much slower this time. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the soft rustle of the paper and the ticking of the clock on the wall. "So, you got selected," he said finally. His voice was calm, but there was a pause that spoke louder than his words. I nodded slowly. "Yes. It's what I always wanted, before." He looked at me, his gaze steady. "Before what?" My eyes softened as I met his. "Before I had a reason to stay." The air between us was suddenly filled with a quiet weight, not anger, not sadness, just a profound uncertainty. He carefully placed the letter on the table. "You should go, Hira. You worked for this." My eyes widened slightly. "You want me to leave?" He shook his head. "No. I want you to choose for yourself." A lump formed in my throat. "You make it sound so easy." He replied softly, "It's not. But the hardest choices are the ones that tell us who we really are." I looked down at the letter again. The crisp black ink suddenly felt heavier than it should. "What if I go?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "And it breaks everything we've built." Ayan's eyes softened with an understanding that always managed to calm my storms. Then it wasn't weak. It was real enough to be tested. I had to turn away, blinking fast to hold back the tears. "Why do you always say things that make my heart heavier?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Because that's what honesty does." The next few days were a blur of quiet thought. The news of the job had spread through the family and everyone was thrilled. "It's such a good position," his mother said, her voice filled with pride. "Ayan, you must be so happy for her." He would just smile and nod. "Of course, Ami." But I could see the conflict in his eyes, the silent battle between his pride for me and the ache in his heart. One evening I found myself packing some clothes, just testing the weight of the idea, seeing what I might take if I decided to go. I folded each piece of fabric carefully as if afraid the cloth itself might absorb my hesitation. Ayan appeared at the doorway, his voice quiet. "You'll miss your plants." I jumped, startled. "You scared me." He offered a faint smile. "I didn't mean to. Just checking if hope would survive without you." My eyes softened. Hope was the little sapling we'd planted together on the balcony. "Hope's stronger than she looks," I replied. "So are you," he said softly. I walked closer to him, the letter still clutched between my fingers. "What would you do if I go?" He met my eyes without a flicker of doubt. "Wait." The simplicity of his answer took my breath away. "And if I don't?" His smile deepened, reaching his eyes. Then I'll thank every star that kept you here. We stood there in silence for a moment, so close, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. I hate that you make it sound so simple, I whispered. It's not, he said again, his voice a low murmur. It's love, Hira. It's never simple. Tears welled up in my eyes again and I looked away. I don't want to hurt you. He reached out, his voice a whisper against my ear. You won't, because whatever you choose, it'll still be you. And that's who I love. Just then the rain began to fall outside, a soft rhythmic patter against the window pane, like a heartbeat for the world. I slowly folded the letter and placed it on the table between us. Then maybe I'll decide tomorrow. Ayan nodded, his understanding a silent comfort. Take your time. Some choices deserve silence before answers. I offered a weak smile, my eyes glistening. You always know what to say. He smiled back. Only when I mean it. Later that night I found myself back on the balcony, watching our little plant, Hope, swaying gently in the rain. The city lights shimmered below and the scent of wet earth filled the air. My heart whispered the question my lips couldn't form. Do I stay for love, or do I leave for myself? Just then, the door opened softly behind me. It was Ayan, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. He stood beside me, placing 1 cup in my hands. No decision tonight? He asked quietly. I shook my head. Just peace. He looked out at the rain-washed city. Then maybe that's enough for now. We stood together in silence, our hands almost touching on the cool railing, just watching the rain fall. And somewhere between choice and chance we both knew, tomorrow would change everything. The day arrived sooner than either of them wanted. The letter on the table was no longer just paper and ink. It was a doorway, and Hira stood at its very edge. Her suitcase lay open on the bed, half filled. She folded her clothes carefully, one by one, a simple, mundane task to steady her trembling hands. Every sound, the soft zip of a pocket, the gentle rustle of fabric felt amplified, louder than it should be, as if the house itself was holding its breath, listening to her prepare to leave. Downstairs, Ayan poured tea. He moved slowly, his actions deliberate, almost as if he could slow time itself by refusing to rush. It would be the last time they had tea together this week, this month. He wasn't sure. He had promised her this freedom, this chance to chase a dream she'd almost given up on. But now, with every slow, measured breath, he found himself wishing she wouldn't take it. When Hira came down the stairs, her small suitcase rolling softly behind her, he looked up from the steaming cups. Their eyes met across the quiet room, and for a long moment, neither of them smiled. It was too heavy for smiles. You're really leaving, he said, his voice quiet, a statement more than a question. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It's only a few hours away, Ayan. It's not another country. I'll come visit. He handed her a cup of tea, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. Then let's pretend it's just a short trip, like you're going to the market and we'll be back by evening. She attempted a smile, but it faltered on her lips. Pretending won't make it any easier. His gaze fell to her hand, which was now resting on the handle of her suitcase, gripping it tightly. No, he agreed softly, but it might help us breathe. They sat together at the small kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared countless meals and conversations. They sipped their tea in a profound silence, a silence filled with everything they couldn't bring themselves to say. The world around them looked painfully ordinary. The chairs in their usual spots, the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. But nothing felt the same. An invisible shift had occurred, and the entire room felt foreign. Finally, Hira broke the stillness. Her voice was just a whisper. When I first applied for this job, I was running away from a life I didn't choose. I was desperate for an escape. She paused, looking at him. But now I'm walking away from the life I built, with you. Ayan's eyes lowered to his cup. He swirled the tea, watching the tiny vortex form and disappear. You don't owe me anything, Hira. This was never a transaction. She reached across the table, her fingers gently touching the back of his hand. Her touch was as light as a whisper, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 goodbyes. That's what makes this so much harder. You never asked for anything, and somehow you gave me everything. The sudden, sharp sound of a taxi horn outside shattered the fragile moment. Her ride had arrived. Time was up. She stood slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "Will you be okay?" she asked, her concern for him overriding her own turmoil. He managed a faint, sad smile. "I was okay before you came along. I suppose I'll learn how to be again." But the truth was a tremor in his voice, a subtle break that he couldn't quite hide. She hesitated, then took a small, uncertain step toward him. Her eyes drifted to the small green plant on the windowsill, its leaves reaching for the morning sun. They had named it Hope. "Take care of Hope," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will," he replied, his gaze following hers. "And it will wait for you." At the doorway, with the cool morning air on her face, she turned back one last time. He was still standing where she'd left him, framed by the golden light pouring through the window, a solitary figure in a home that was about to feel empty. "Say something before I go," she whispered, needing one last word to hold on to. He took a deep, steadying breath, his eyes locking with hers. "Come back when you're ready. Not because you feel you have to." Her throat tightened, a lump forming that she couldn't swallow. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears that stubbornly refused to fall. "You know, Ian, for someone who says so little, you always say the right thing." She stepped outside. The world seemed to rush in, the sound of rain beginning to fall, the rumble of the taxi's engine. The driver took her bag and loaded it into the trunk. She looked at the house one last time, the familiar balcony, the window of her room, the small plant whose leaves seemed to be waving in the gentle wind. Ayan watched from the doorway, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides, the only outward sign of his inner struggle. As the car pulled away from the curb, the air between them became heavy, saturated with all the unspoken "I love yous" and "don't goes." He whispered it into the rain-soaked air, so quietly that no one could possibly hear. "Goodbye, Hira." No one heard it, except perhaps the rain itself. Later that night, the house felt cavernous. It was no longer a home, but a hollow space. The walls echoed his solitary footsteps as he moved from room to room. He sat on the couch, his eyes fixed on the empty chair across from him, the one she always sat in. By the balcony, the little plant, Hope, stood watch, its leaves trembling slightly in the night wind. He whispered into the quiet, "She told me to take care of you, but how do I take care of silence?" He poured himself a single cup of tea and watched the steam rise, curl, and then vanish into nothing. The taste was the same, but the warmth felt different. It didn't reach him. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the yellow glow of the streetlights. He closed his eyes, and her words replayed in his mind. "I'll come visit." A small, bittersweet smile touched his lips. "She will," he murmured to the empty room. "She always keeps her promises." Upstairs, in the now empty room, he couldn't bring himself to enter for long. A silk scarf she had forgotten rested on the back of a chair. A draft from the window made it move slightly, a faint, ghostly wave. He walked in, picked it up, and held it to his face, inhaling the faint scent of her that still lingered. He stood there for a long time, just holding it. "She'll come back," he whispered again, a mantra against the encroaching loneliness. "She has to." He placed the scarf carefully on the table beside the plant and turned off the light. The click of the switch was loud in the silence. That night the house slept, but two hearts in two different cities stayed wide awake, remembering the same warmth, hearing the echo of the same rain, and waiting for the same sun to rise. 3 months had passed. The house that once held laughter had grown quiet again, but not empty. Ayan kept it alive, watering the plants, making tea for one, opening windows each morning the way Hira liked. On the balcony, the small plant, Hope, had grown taller. Its leaves reached toward the light just as she had promised it would. Some mornings he spoke to it. Half a joke, half a confession. "You're doing well," he'd murmur. "Better than me." He smiled at the absurdity of talking to a plant, but it made the silence easier. He poured 2 cups of tea by habit, one for himself, one that stayed untouched on the counter. Every few nights he reread her old letter, the one that had started everything, not because he couldn't move on, but because he didn't want to forget how it felt to be needed. That evening the air smelled of rain again, the same smell from the night he confessed his heart. He stood by the window, eyes distant, when the sound of a car stopped outside. A faint knock followed. He opened the door and froze. Hira stood there, umbrella dripping, her scarf clinging to her shoulders, her eyes shining through the drizzle. For a second, neither moved. The world shrank to a single heartbeat. "Hi," she said quietly. He blinked, almost afraid she was just a memory made of rain. "You're here. I told you I'd visit." He exhaled, half a laugh, half disbelief. "You took your time." She smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. "I had to finish what I started." She stepped inside, and the faint smell of her perfume filled the room, the same soft scent that used to live in every corner. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with things unsaid. Ayan finally spoke. "How's the job?" "It's good," she said, her gaze drifting around the familiar space. "But it's not home." He nodded slowly, not trusting his voice. She looked around, her eyes taking in every detail. "You kept everything the same." "I couldn't change it," he said softly. "It felt like I'd be erasing you." Her eyes glistened. "You never could." They sat at the old dining table again. He poured her tea without asking, the gesture automatic, familiar. "It tastes the same," she said after a sip, a warm smile in her voice. He smiled back. Same kettle, same hands. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that feels like breathing after being underwater for too long. Then his expression grew more serious. "Why did you come back, Hira?" She set her cup down, her gaze meeting his. "Because every day I tried to build a life that didn't have you in it, and it felt wrong." He looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "So what now?" She took a slow, deliberate breath. "Now I stop running." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. Inside, the rain pressed gently against the windows like quiet applause for their courage. Later, they stood on the balcony again. The plant, Hope, swayed happily in the cool air. She touched its leaves and smiled. "Hope survived." He looked at her, his expression soft. "Because you planted it right." She shook her head. "Because you never gave up watering it." They stood side by side, watching the silver rain wash over the city. "You know," she said softly, "people say every story has an ending." He glanced at her. "Maybe ours doesn't. Maybe it just changes chapters." She turned toward him, a curious light in her eyes. "Then what is this chapter called?" He thought for a moment, then whispered, "Coming home." Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile stayed. "I like that." She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. Neither moved. Time seemed to stop once more, just as it had that first night by candlelight. The clock ticked softly, counting breaths instead of seconds. He spoke again, his voice low and steady. "I missed you every day." "I know," she replied. I heard it in the silence. Hours later, when the rain had stopped, Hira stood near the doorway with her small travel bag. "Are you leaving again?" he asked quietly, the question hanging in the still air. She smiled, a reassuring and gentle expression. "Not tonight." He nodded, stepping aside so she could pass. The door clicked softly as she closed it. Not in farewell, but in return. The night settled around them. No promises, no grand speeches, just quiet understanding, warm tea cooling on the table, and the faint hum of the world moving on. Outside, the city lights flickered through the fading rain. Inside, two souls finally stood still. Some stories don't end with words. They end with a door that closes softly, and the feeling that somehow love found its way home. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories like this one. We'll see you in the next chapter.